Okay, we'll start this webinar. Good evening, doctors. I'm Gaurav Mangol. I'm the marketing head from Sonoscape India. Today's ultrasound webinar topic is on 3D ultrasound applications in clinical gynecology. And to conduct this session, we'll have a very renowned speaker and teacher, Dr. Manju Virmani, with us. Ma'am is working in this ultrasound and radiology field for last so many years in Delhi. Before I hand over this session to ma'am, I'll take few minutes of you to take you through Sonoscape ultrasound technologies and products, as there are few people who are joining this webinar. So I'll start the presentation. We at Sonoscape are focusing on three important categories in a color Doppler systems. First is image quality. Second, enhanced tools for optimized care, and to make the equipments very much user-friendly to the doctors. As we have multiple R&D centers globally, where our R&D engineers are working on hardware and software, and they're developing new technologies every day. Because of this strong R&D platform, we are capable of creating high-speed ultrasound platforms, where the CPU works 4 times faster as conventional platform, GPU response rate is 10 times faster, and we get a very good frame rate in these high-end systems and our range of ultrasound products what we are having with us. Now, artificial intelligence is a future which is coming very promisingly in ultrasound field. So what is our expectations when AI meets ultrasound? Quick answers, better accuracy, higher quality. So with the deep learnings architecture and structure, the ultrasound equipment reads the clinical images which are coming on the monitor and accordingly provides the relative information on screen. We have introduced in 4 different applications to start with artificial intelligence. First in obstetrics, S-fetus, S-MSK, S-breast, and S-thyroid. And our R&D team is already working on so many other applications where we can incorporate artificial intelligence to make the workflow much easy and can reduce the scanning time per patient. As per current situation of COVID-19, as we all know that we want to finish off our scans fast and give accurate results when patients are coming for the scanning. So these auto measurements really help to shorten the scanning time. It makes the workflow much easier and give you accurate results on screen. In obstetrics, we have automatic entry measurements. We have automatic follicle count measurements which are available, which are with the touch of a button, you will get all the details on screen. This is something unique what we are having. Sonoscape transvaginal transducer is having a very specific feature which on screen you can see live temperature, tip temperature on screen, where it will be very helpful and from the safety point of view for the patients, and it increases the life of the transducer also. We have elastography can be done with our transvaginal in gynecology application, where we have to see the cervix cancer. So elastography can be used very easily. Then we have contrast imaging for fallopian tubes, where we can inject the contrast agent and we can do these specific scannings very easily in our multiple models what we are having. Advanced 3D 4D features all are available in our equipment. S-Live, where we can see the realistic view of the 3D volume, S-Depth. Then S-Live Silhouette, where glass view is there, where we can see the internal structures very clearly with the glass view. Then we have multi-slice imaging, and color 3D is also available in advanced 3D 4D application in our different models what we are having. As Sonoscape is having a shared services platform, so all kind of applications can be done very easily. starting from general imaging, small parts and vascular, pediatrics, obstetrics and gynecology, 3D, 4D applications, and cardiology also. Coming on to the product range, what we are having, we have different series of products which are available with us. S series, where we have standalone equipments plus portable equipments, both are available. Coming to the P series, we have a premium series where again we have multiple models to cater different kinds of applications and different kinds of categories. For point of care, bedside scanning and ICU OT scanning, we have these portable equipments also, X3 and X5, which are available, and they are whole body color Doppler systems. In the portable segment, again, we have a E series where we have these models available, and again, these are on shared services platform and can do all kinds of scannings can be done very, very easily with this. With all these multiple models, what I have shown in previous slides, different kinds of transducer are also available where we have multiple convex probes, transvaginal probes, that's like probes like hockey stick for MSK application, and all those dedicated transducers are also available, and biopsy testments are also available with all the other transducers which are there. Just a glimpse of the resolution and the grayscale resolution and color Doppler which our wide range of ultrasound equipment gives. Then as I have previously also discussed, all kind of 3D, 4D scannings can be done very, very easily with our range of products which we have. As we are very much focused on after sales support, as we all know that after the installation of the equipment, it's very, very important that the doctor should be used to with the ultrasound equipment. So we have a full trained application specialist team available in India. And for any kind of a service issue, we have engineers placed at multiple locations, which can be directly connected and can give you support online, offline, with the visit. Everything can be provided very, very easily. Thank you so much. So here I'll conduct my presentation, and without taking much time, I'd like to hand over the session to Dr. Manju Virmani. Ma'am, over to you. Thank you so much.
This I have to go to single frame. This is okay. I hope
yes,
you can. Okay,
we can see. We can see.
Okay. So first, I would like to thank the Skonoscape team, Mahinder and Gaurav, and all the people who are organizing these excellent webinars and keeping all the doctors and the healthcare facilities busy, especially in this present era with the all this pandemic of COVID. And I wish all the doctors, I hope they're all doing well, and I wish their families are doing well, and hopeful will continue doing well and follow the standard protocol which has been advised by the government. So not taking too much time, I'm going to be talking on 3D ultrasound applications in clinical gynecology. What is 3D ultrasound? 3D ultrasound is an important imaging technique that answers questions which cannot be addressed with traditional 2D imaging. This involves acquisition of series of 2D images that can be displayed collectively in a variety of imaging modalities, which actually Gaurav has just shown us. And then there's a rapid acquisition of volume of data that can be stored, reviewed, and manipulated retrospectively, producing images in any desired plane. Now, always the question is, takes too long to do. That's not true. Time of acquisition is less than 30 seconds, and 30 seconds to 2 minutes for the post-processing time. If there's a good 2D image, a good quality 3D, it doesn't take too long to do it. It's basically, while you're scanning, you can do all your reconstructions. Now, I'm going to be talking on how we acquire the data and then use its clinical application in different fields of gynecology, early pregnancy, maybe a little bit of female infertility, and quantification of blood flow. Now, what is the basic difference? When we do a 2D scan or we do an endovaginal ultrasound, it's a dynamic scanning to get images like this, long axis and transverse view. We cannot have them displayed together, but we have to scan and get these images separately. And this is a pretty decent image where we can measure the endometrial thickness in the long axis view. When we try doing the 3D, we have to first make sure that we keep our transducer probe very still. And we have to let the machine do all the work. Now, when the machine does it after acquiring, there's this multiplanar format, which is what it gets displayed as, where the long axis and the transverse view are seen simultaneously. And then the machine reconstitutes what we call the C plane or the coronal plane. And the advantage of this is that all three planes are seen simultaneously, and the region of interest can be studied in different angles. We can go back and forth and look for the problems. Then there is this rendered image, which actually gives the end-face view of the uterus, where the fundus, the fundus and the cervix are all seen in a single plane. And this is actually the same thing, which is the C plane, which has been reconstituted by the equipment. Now, when we have these, we have a multiplanar format. We look for the anatomy, and here we can see that there is a thick endomyometrial layer, which is separating from the endometrial cavity by this thin hypoechoic halo, which is the junctional zone. And then we have the fundus, which looks convex, which is a standard this thing that the fundus of the uterus is generally convex on coronal planes. The endometrium is seen as a flat anterior margin, and it has a triangular shape, and we can look for the interstitial segments of the fallopian tube. Again, a normal anatomy of the uterus, but here what we are trying to do is display the junctional zone. And when we are doing the application, we will see what is the usefulness of the junctional zone. So here we can have this junctional zone, which is a hypoechoic halo, and this can be studied in transverse, long axis, and the coronal views, as well as in the rendered images. These are just a different display, which Gaurav has just talked about, to show the inner, what we are interested in, to see the inside of the uterine cavity. And here we have normal uterus, normal myometrial endometrial interface. But here we can see we are losing the myometrial endometrial interface in a patient with adenomyosis. Now then there are these inversion images, a normal looking uterus, and here we can see a partial septate. Now, inversion may not be very useful in the uterine anomalies, but in the uterine lesions, but it's very useful when we are looking at the ovaries, especially in an ovary like this, which is very classically showing so many follicles, and it's most likely a polycystic ovary. Then the other advancement which has come up is in these volume contrast imaging. This is a very simple evaluation. You have the sagittal plane visualized in an A plane, and here it improves the contrast resolution and decreases the artifacts in the tissues. It can be seen in any plane. We can have a plane where we can have the simultaneous visualization of the sagittal and the coronal plane at the same time. And then the modification of this OmniView is that we can, generally speaking, endometrium may not be a straight line or a convex. It may sometimes be very complex. So that's when this OmniView comes into, which is very important. And all machines have their own ways. You can trace these lines, you can draw polylines, you can have a curve, and then we can demonstrate all this and get an answer to what we are looking for. And here we can see that it's a septate uterus, and what we were trying to also show is the anterior fundal contour. This was actually a study which was done by people when they were trying to evaluate the Mullerian duct anomalies, and they found that the coronal plane or the rendered image is the best view. But they also said that the VCI-C plane, which is I just showed you, where we draw the line through the endometrium and we have a simultaneous display of the coronal section, a very easy way to do it. Then the other modification is like tomographic multi-slice imaging, which is nothing but like a CT scan. Here we can we can change the thickness of the cuts. We can do it in any plane, whether sagittal, coronal, or transverse views. We can increase the number of slices or decrease the slices. And here we can see there's a large transmural fibroid, and which is actually indenting the endometrial cavity and is displacing the interstitial segment up. And here there's a small polyp in a patient who just came for a routine checkup and wanted to conceive. Now, with these images, when the OBGYN see, they can themselves decide what would be the management in such patients. When we all know, when we inject saline into the endometrial cavity, these are much better seen, as we can see here in the coronal plane, a nice looking endometrium, and these are sagittal and transverse views. Now, here's another patient which has fluid, which we had to put in fluid, and look at this focal thickening. And this was vascular on color flow, and this turned out to be endometrial malignancy. Volume assessment is more accurate on 3D, and it has an error margin of only 5% as compared to 2D volume. This, Gaurav again has talked, and this is actually a beautiful modality because it's a software program designed to provide automatic volume calculation of fluid-filled areas. And it identifies each and every follicle. It gives a specific color, and it measures them in all these axes, X, Y, Z, gives the mean diameter, gives the volume. So it is very, very advantageous, especially when the number of follicles are more than 10. And in patients with who are for artificial reproductive assisted reproductions. So there, this plays a very important role, and I'll show you later when we come to that. Now, when we see the uterus like this, which is a fundus, is convex fundus, anterior margin of the endometrium flat, we know that it's a normal uterus, and its 3D coronal plane is very, very specific to say it's a normal uterus. So this plays a very important role when we are trying to evaluate the uterus. We look for the uterine shape abnormalities, and we'll go through all these as we go along. Now, the most people who present to us for who have to be worked up for these Mullerian duct anomalies are these recurrent pregnancy losses, implantation failure, and infertility. Even I'm putting infertility here because these are the patients, even though we know that MDA does not prevent conception, but still I'm putting it here because most of the time we get a lot of people for infertility in this particular group to look for the Mullerian anomalies. And we also know that the prevalence is much higher in women who have history of recurrent miscarriages. Depending on the degree of the anatomical distortion, they are associated with adverse reproductive outcomes. As we can see here, these are two septate uterus, and the risk of spontaneous abortion in first trimester for septate uterus is very high, as compared to bicorporal uterus, where the cervical incompetence is the major problem, and they generally, we start after 12 weeks of pregnancy, we start looking for the cervix and we evaluate them more frequently because of the risk of cervical incompetence. Hemiuterus has a very high spontaneous abortion risk, but they also have a high risk for ectopic pregnancy. And if there is, we have a unicornuate small uterus, but it also has rudimentary horn, then they can get a pregnancy in this horn. And this is actually like a medical emergency because if not picked up, the uterus can rupture. They are also associated with multiple renal anomalies. So whenever we pick up any MDA, we should look for the kidney problems. As we can see here, this is a hemiuterus, and this patient had a single pelvic kidney. They have a higher association with skeletal abnormalities, cardiac anomalies, and because there's retrograde blood flow into the pouch of Douglas, they can also give problems like endometriosis. Now, it's important to recognize them and classify them because now the surgical management has really improved. So if we can give a good diagnosis, the management for that particular patient is very good. It improves the reproductive outcome. It minimizes complications such as endometriosis and infertility, and it prevents unnecessary and inadequate surgeries. Now, so far, we have been using this classification, which is by American Reproductive Society of Medicine, and we have all these classifications, which we go through. But the present, this thing has been changed because there are certain problems in this ARSM classification, which has been taken care by this group, which is the uh, European Society of Human Reproduction and Embryology. So they have taken this and they have classified into different categories. And one of the major advantages is that the class 0 or the normal uterus was not as a part of the AFS classification. Now here, when we see this, we see a normal fundal contour, which is convex. The endometrial cavity or the interosteal line is generally straight or may be slightly curved. We look for the two interstitial segments of the fallopian tube and the endometrium, which is triangular. And sometimes there may be a mild indentation at the fundal midline, which is less than 50% of the wall thickness. Because the one of the other advantages of the SG classification is that each woman has a uterus with different myometrial thickness. So when we measure all these measurements, which are used for AFS classification, are a problematic ones. Indentation along the anterior endometrium. These are three different patients, and there's an indentation which we can see on the endometrial cavity, and this is less than 50% uterine wall thickness at the fundal midline. Now, if we use this classification, this is normal. But when we were using the AFS classification or ASM classification, these are classified as arcuate uterus. Now here the indentation is less than 10 millimeters and the indented inner endometrial contour angle, which we can measure, is more than 90 degrees. The class 1 is the dysmorphic uterus. And now here what happens is there's a narrow endometrial cavity, and is because of the increased thickness of the lateral myometrium. And the fundal contour is again convex. And but here the length of the uterine corpus to cervix is 2/3 to 1/3. This was actually earlier picked up when it was used to be due to the iatrogenic. There was a drug which was being used, and that's not being used anymore. But this type of uterine cavity can still be seen in acquired conditions like in the intrauterine adhesions, tuberculosis, or adenomyosis. When we are trying to diagnose them, I'm showing this because it's important. It's the coronal plane which is going to diagnose this T-shaped uterus, and when we'll come further, we'll see. So one of them is the lateral indentation angle, which is formed by, we drop a angle between the cornua and the internal os, and we divide this as the angle which we are looking for. This should be less than 130 degrees. Then we measure the width from this line, which is drawn again the same angle where we draw this line, and this distance should be more than 7 millimeters. And this T angle, which is formed by the anterior margin of the endometrium and the lateral margin of the endometrium, and this angle should be less than 40 degrees when we are trying to diagnose this T-shaped uterus. Now, these are multiple images of the septate uterus. Septate uterus are the most common presentations which we have. They actually account for almost like 50% of the Mullerian duct anomalies. Now, here what happens is there is, during embryological development, there is there is this internal indentation, or the septum fails to fuse. So when the septum fails to fuse and it ends above the level of internal os, it's the partial type. When the septum goes all the way into the cervical canal, and sometimes it may even go and involve the vaginal canal, that's the type 2, that's the complete septate uterus. When we diagnose these, we can do it on 2D also, where we can see these two separate endometrial cavities, but the probability of missing is quite high. When we do the 3D, we can see the anterior fundal contour. We can look up for the fundal contour, which is generally convex or may show mild indentation. And then there are two endometrial cavities which are separated by the septum. And there are two interstitial segments of the fallopian tubes. From the ARSM classification, there was multiple measurements which one had to do. One was the internal indentation, which was more than 10 millimeters. Apex is the distance which is above the intercornual line to the fundus of the uterus. We used to look for fundal indentation, intercornual distance, which is less than 4 centimeter, and indented inner endometrial contour angle, which is less than 90 degrees. But in the Esri classification, the only thing which is used is the thickness, the mean thickness of the anterior and posterior uterine wall, and the septum is 50% of the uterine wall thickness. And it's much easier actually to use this classification as compared to AFS classification. Now, ISWAG recommendation is that indentation depth should be more than 10 millimeters. Now, these are three different uterine cavities. And here the length of the cavity is pretty decent. So this particular patient probably has a lesser, has a better prognostic indicator for carrying the pregnancy to, whereas compared to these two, where there may be a probability of missed abortions much higher. Now we can also look for the vascularity, and if the septum is vascular, there is there's more problems of implantation. Now, these are six different images of six different patients. Because the problem with SG classification is that we are diagnosing a lot more normal or arcuate uterus as partial septate. Now, if we look at this image and we look at this one, we can say this is a pretty much normal uterus, and this is definitely a partial septate uterus. But what about the others? So then this they form this group, which is congenital uterine malformation experts, CUME, to better define the criteria for differentiating normal arcuate and septate uterus. So the criteria which was used was indentation depth, indentation angle, and indentation to wall thickness ratio. Indentation depth is nothing when we draw the line between the interosteal or the intercornual line, and we go to the tip of the endometrium, and we measure this distance. External cleft is the distance above the intercornual line to the fundal cleft. And the wall thickness is the mean of the anterior and posterior walls. We can measure it in the sagittal plane, and we can also measure it in the coronal plane. This is this distance above the intercornual line to the fundus of the uterus. And the indentation angle is we can trace it along the two lines along the indentation apex. We trace it like this, and that's the indentation angle. Now, for recommendation to diagnose septate uterus by CUME definition is when there's an indentation depth which is more than 10 millimeters, angle is less than 140 degrees, the ratio of indentation depth and wall thickness ratio is more than 110 degrees. And this was the best cutoffs which have been taken for. According to this group of people, they use indentation to wall thickness ratio, which is more than 50%. ASRM classification, they use indentation depth, which is more than 50 millimeters, and the indentation angle, which is less than 90 degrees. Now, ISWAG recommendation is to use the indentation depth, which is more than 10 millimeters. When we are doing the normal or arcuate uterus, the recommendation is to use the indentation depth, which is less than 10 millimeters, and the angle, which is more than 90 degrees. Now, bicorporal uterus includes the bicornuate uterus and the uterine diadelphus, which was classified from the earlier classification of American Society of Reproduction. Now, here what happens is a fusion defect during embryological. It fails to fuse, and there's an external indentation which is more than the uterine wall thickness, which is more than 50% of the uterine wall thickness. And then there's an inner indentation which divides the endometrial cavity into two. So that there are two uterine cavities, each having its own myometrium and the endometrium. This can be further actually classified into partial, where you can see the external indentation, you see the internal indentation, two cavities, and then there's a common cavity here, which is a partial type. In the complete type, there's complete two separate uterine cavities, and they're completely separate. Then there's this third type, which is the bicorporal septate uterus, where you have the wall thickness, which is more than 150% of the this indentation. Then there's this hemiuterus, which is a single endometrial cavity, and there's a single interstitial segment of the fallopian tube. But these are also associated with the rudimentary horn, which is the 4 type A, and the endometrium may be functional in this case, as we can see here. Then there's a type 4B. There is again a small hemiuterus, which is associated with the rudimentary horn. And if you compare the endometrial cavity, endometrium here, which looks pretty normal as compared to here, is thin and we can barely make out, then it could also have an absent contralateral part. Now, this is a patient who persistently gets severe pain during her menstrual cycle. It's actually a complete septate uterus, and there's this fluid collection. This collection has actually been drained 2 or 3 times, and every time she comes back with severe pain with so much collection. And this is another patient who has uterine diadelphys, where the right horn looks pretty much clean. And here you have the fluid collection, which is going all the way into the endometrial cavity. So again, 3D plays an important role to diagnose these. There was this study which I looked into to see the difference in the sensitivity and specificity by 3D ultrasound and MRI. And it is, if you look at it, it's almost the same. It's about 98 to 100% for 3D ultrasound and MRI. So 3D endovaginal ultrasound is the primary modality of choice when we are looking or diagnosing these Müllerian anomalies. Now, the other group of patients, which is the abnormal uterine bleed, is the commonest complaint for which they visit the outpatient departments to the gynecologist. Now, here what we are looking for is leiomyomas, polyps, and cancers. Now, it's 2D ultrasound does pick up leiomyomas all the time, but 3D ultrasound is used to map the exact location of the fibroids in relation to the endometrial cavity and the surrounding structures. And this is important because the type of surgery depends on what kind of fibroid it is. And also it is useful in monitoring the reduction in size of the fibroids in patients who take these GnRH analogs. And also these days they are using uterine artery embolization to treat them. So it's very useful in follow-up of these patients. Now here's the image, and this is a sagittal, this is a diagrammatic image, and this is a sagittal plane, and you can see these different fibroids, which are classified according to the FIGO, which is Federation of India International Gynecologist and Obstetrician. Sorry. So it's not that you can't pick it up on 2D, but it's a cumbersome procedure to look for all these and classify them according to this. And one should classify them because that's the management varies depending on what kind of fibroid it is. And so here you have an example that this looks as a large transmural fibroid, which looks as if it's indenting the endometrial cavity. But if you look at these multiplanar format, this is actually just showing a mass impression and not just being in contact. And there's another submucous fibroid which is growing into it. The other advantage of this 3D, this thing is that we can actually measure the myometrial thickness on the outsides, which makes a difference again in the management point of view. And we can then add to complete our study or complete report, we can add right, left, we can add the anterior posterior walls and give the size of the fibroids. And if there are multiple, then we can always write down that, okay, the dominant ones are measured. So the importance of 3D is we have these 4 different images of submucous fibroids, which are nothing but those which are growing into the endometrial cavity. So what we are trying to do is to tell them which are the intracavitary, those which are completely within the endometrial cavity, those which are involving more than 50% are growing into the endometrial cavity, and those involving less than 50% of the cavity. Then if they're intramural, what they're interested to know is like this here, it's in contact, but this particular patient also shows another one, which is like a submucous component to it. Now here's a completely intramural, also seen here is a partial septate uterus. And then when we diagnose subserous uterus, the importance is what we are supposed to see is how much of the component of the mass is within the myometrium, whether it's more than 50% or whether it's less than 50% within the myometrium, and most of it's jutting out. As you can see here, it's completely going out. It's distorting the fundal contour, but the endometrium is pretty nicely seen. So the differentiation with submucous myomas, they're generally hypoechoic. They have a texture which is similar to myometrium. Generally, they do not show any vascularity. And these have to be differentiated from the endometrial polyps, which are generally echogenic. They have a texture similar to endometrium, and the color flow may show a vascular pedicle. But in polyps, we are not that the 2D does not pick it up. What we are interested to tell is what is the site of the polyp, so that when they do hysteroscopy, they can see them. And here, like it's in the right corner, then we are interested in number of polyps along the lateral wall. And we know that whenever we in saline infusion sonography always shows these polyps and synechia better delineates them. And this is a large cervical polyp which is prolapsing, and it was extremely vascular and color flow. So this is 3D power Doppler, which is actually more sensitive. So this vascularity is better picked up. Now, endometrial cancers, when we see there's a huge mass here, which is extremely vascular and color flow, we are losing the myometrial endometrial interface on this side, but the lateral margins are pretty well delineated. But this needs to be biopsied to make sure this turned out to be a cancer. This is another 3 coronal plane where you can see there's a mass here, and there's a bulge along the right anterior endometrial contour. Another example of a polyp which was malignant polyp. And this is completely distorted endometrium. We can see we completely lose the outline, and the color flow shows a vascular pedicle, which is actually crossing this myometrial endometrial interface. And this is actually a large fibroid, a large endometrial cancer, which was in the lower uterine segment. There was extension into the myometrium because no myometrium could be visualized in this lower segment. Now, adenomyosis is another condition which presents with a large globular uterus. And we can see this on 2D. In fact, if you ask me, a large globular uterus with all these linear echo densities and these multiple tiny cystic areas are better picked up on a good 2D resolution. But what is not picked up is the myometrial endometrial interface, as we can see 3 different images. And here there's a complete loss of myometrial endometrial interface in these 2. Here we can see that there is these striations which are going into the surrounding myometrium. And these are very classic signs of the adenomyotic uterus. Now, intrauterine adhesions or the Asherman syndrome, these women present with less menstrual flow or amenorrhea, and on the ultrasound, they are seen as very thin endometrium. And obviously, this thin endometrium one has to correlate to the date of the last menstrual period. So these are generally less than 2 millimeters. They present as marginal irregularities. They can present as completely fibrotic, completely extensive adhesions in the endometrium where you can barely see any good-looking endometrial cavity. And then they can get fibrosis, which can be seen as these calcifications and which are within the endometrium. And in this particular patient, large synechia or adhesions. And what one can do is we can measure the volume of the endometrium and we can measure the volume of the synechia so as to be of assistance for further management on this particular patient. These are different kind of intrauterine devices, and 3D coronal plane is a beautiful way to localize these intrauterine devices. These are all in normal position, and I'm not sure we have seen any of these. This I was used to see when I was a student, which was called a Lippes loop. Now, there's this intrauterine device which is low in position. There's another one which is again in the lower endometrial cavity. So obviously, if this low in position is losing its purpose of using as a contraception. Here, it was going into the myometrium. And this is an old slide of mine, where basically shows this intrauterine device indenting the gestational sac. Now, these are 3 different patients with densely calcified tissue, which is retained calcified fetal tissue. Very easily picked up on 3D. Now, in tuberculosis, we can see a completely distorted and obliterated endometrial cavity, which is more than 50%. We can look for these interstitial segments, which are more vertically oriented. Then the hydrosalpinx is much better picked up on 3D. And they can also have an axial fixation, where here you can see the ovary, and this is a dilated fallopian tube. and there was loculated fluid collection because of the addition. So tuberculosis can present like all these and are much better picked up on when we do a 3D scan. Coming to ovarian masses, now here what I would like to say is that the pattern recognition approach which has been given by the IOTA is actually a very good modality to classify all these lesions. We can see that this is a simple cyst, this is a hemorrhagic cyst with a clot, a retracted clot. This is like an endometrial cyst, which is has a classic ground glass appearance or low level internal echoes, and this is an echogenic focus, which is dermoid cyst. When we do the 3D, the advantage of 3D in this particular patient is, yes, we can see the outline very nicely, but this is an avascular clot. This is endometriosis, and the only thing which it has added is, yes, there's a focus of focal thickening, which is the endometriotic irregularity which we see in these endometriosis. And dermoid, it has actually not given us any more information except that, yes, we are definitely sure it's nothing else. And the sensitivity and specificity using this approach is almost like 88 to 100%, with the sensitivity and specificity to goes up to almost 90%. Now, if there are masses like this, a cystic complex with a echogenic, regular looking echogenic intramural nodule, and we do a 3D, we can see this nodule, which is completely irregular, engulfing the mass. And what is more, this thing is on the 3D power Doppler, which is giving extreme haphazard sort of vascularity. So we know it's a malignant mass, but this just added to our level of confidence in calling this a malignant lesion. And here there's another distinct 2D images which shows a multiloculated mass with echogenic intramural nodules, internal echoes. Same thing which we are seeing, more irregularity of the wall, and color flow is more specific because it's an extremely vascular flow. And these are both different patients with ovarian tumor malignancies. So the sensitivity and specificity in predicting malignancy is pretty good just by using the 2D frame, just using the IOTA morphological classification. Now, what 3D does is it gives us the smooth lining of the wall, which is very important because like here we can see unilocular cyst, thin margin, regular smooth margin, and we know there is no septa, no solid components, and no papillary projections. Whereas this is another patient which actually on 2D really doesn't show too much. But when we do a 3D, look at all these nodular projections which are coming out. And this turned out to be a cystadenoma. And then 3D is pretty good in looking for the wall thickness, looking for these papillary projections, and looking for these intramural nodules. And tumor infiltration of the capsule is better demonstrated on 3D. Vascularity, again, is very useful because 3D power Doppler gives us much better visualization. Here we have a pericystic, we have a periphery in the wall of the cyst, and there's an avascular clot. And this is a septal vessel in the endometriosis. The solid tumor showing increased vascularity, which is peripheral, central, irregular caliber, and lot of branching pattern. And here is the increased vascularity in the intramural nodule. There's this score, color score, which is given by IOTA, which is like no detective, and there's no vascularity, there's 1. Minimal vascularity is 2. 3 is moderate vascularization, and 4 is abundant vascularization. So it's much easier to classify them according to this IOTA classification. And absence of flow obviously increases the likelihood of being benign. This is a hemorrhagic cyst with an avascular clot. This is an endometriotic cyst, which is avascular. But here, it does not mean that all avascular lesions are benign. Here's a tumor where you can, ovarian tumor, where you can barely pick up some central vessels. And when there's increased vascularity, which is in the score of 3 or 4, increases the likelihood of being malignant. But again, not necessarily, because here there's an ectopic pregnancy, which shows a classic ring of fire appearance, and there's a corpus luteum, which shows peripheral removascularity, another example of a corpus luteum. So it doesn't mean that we don't see increased vascularity in benign lesions. Fallopian tube, I think I've already said, it's actually 3D is a beautiful modality. These are generally anechoic. We see the C shape, there are incomplete septation, and this is just the rendered image of the dilated fallopian tube. There's a waist sign, again better seen on a 3D. There are these cogwheel sign and the beads on a string sign. All these signs are better seen on a 3D. We can also look for the interstitial segments of fallopian tubes. These are normal. Here we see a thickened interstitial segments. Here actually we see one, but the other one is completely not visualized. It appears to be pretty rounded. Now this I've already shown, but look at the way it's been stretched out over this large transmural fibroid. And this is the vertical orientation of these interstitial segments, which is actually seen in tuberculosis. Now, we've done all this. Now, we would like to talk a little bit of 3D ultrasound in reproductive medicine. Now, ovarian volume calculations are more accurate. Then cumulus can be demonstrated when we are doing a follicle. When we do a 3D, we can see these cystic areas. It may be a solitary cyst, or it may be multiple small tiny cysts which are seen in the periphery. And it should be seen in all three planes on a 3D to call it a cumulus. And then we can have these facilities detailed follicle count. As we can see here, there are at least 5 or 6, and it's much easier. Just take a volume and the machine itself gives you all the number and the sizes. Vascularity is much better picked on 3D power Doppler, and what we are trying to do is grade the vascularity from 25% to grade 4, which is more than 75%. Now, the advantage is when it's more than 50%, it indicates a better oocyte retrieval rate, number of mature oocytes to be recovered, and there's a better fertilization rate. Polycystic ovaries, we know, are all large volume ovaries. The number of follicles earlier used to be 12, but the recent one is about 25, and it's the endovaginal ultrasound which is to diagnose them. Now here the inversion mode actually helps so beautifully. You can see here, you can't see too many central follicles, but when you do this inversion mode, you pick up multiple central follicles. Stromal vascularity, which is increased, and this increased stromal vascularity may be one of the reasons why these ovaries go into hyperstimulation. Now, there are two key areas where ultrasound can be used, and this is very useful when we are looking for patient-assisted reproductive technology. Now, one is to predict the response to ovarian stimulation, which is the ovarian reserve. And the other is to see the chance of successful implantation of an embryo, which is endometrial receptivity. And obviously, both these are good. But after ART, there is a probability of seeing these multiple gestational sacs. Now, what is ovarian reserve? It's defined by the size and quality of the remaining ovarian follicular pool at any given time and reflects the fertility potential of a woman. So an accurate assessment of ovarian reserve is very important before commencing ART to individualize and improve the patient treatment. And the ultrasound is an excellent way to do that. We can get an antral follicle count, we have ovarian volumes and stromal blood flow. And we can see here the way the number of antral follicles which are picked up, they're color-coded, it gives the number. And when we try and do it on the second, third day, looking for antral follicles, these are small resting follicles in both ovaries, measure between 2 to 8 millimeters and have to be assessed on second, fourth day. Look at the number of follicles. If we were going to count or measure each one of them, it's like an impossible task. You're there for almost half an hour doing it. But machine does it for you in 2 minutes. It gives you a graph. It tells you which are the number of follicles, antral follicles, which are good, which can be stimulated, and which are below 5 millimeters, which are not that great. It gives you the total number. It can also give you the number, the size, and you add the number together to get the total antral follicle count. And here you can see that all the information is available in these two charts which are available. And this is the test of choice when we are quantifying ovarian reserve. The success of IVF depends on this. When there's antral follicle count 7 to 10, there's not that great the chance of the success. So these cycles are ignored. When there's a count more than 1630, the response is pretty good. And when the ovarian volume less than 3 ml, poor prognosis, more than 10 ml, it's generally a polycystic ovaries. And this IVF outcome in these cases is good, but there is a chance of hyperstimulation in these ovaries. Whenever there are more follicles, increased stromal flow, they have a higher probability of ovarian stimulations. Now, we can also help these patients by doing something which we call endometrial receptivity, which refers to a state when the endometrium matures and allows a blastocyst to attach, penetrate, and induce changes in the stroma, which can result in implantation. And the sonographic parameters are thickness and volume, endometrial pattern, and the blood flow. Blood flow is what I'm going to talk about on the next few slides. Because this is what which helps in the improves the implantation potential. So what we do is we do a 3D power Doppler. We look for these vessels which are coming into the subendometrial halo. That's 1. When they go into this echogenic part, which is 2. 3 is the inner layer, and the 4th is the endometrial strip. So we trace these vessels, spiral vessels, which are dilated, and we trace them going all the way to the endometrial cavity, and this is a pretty good endometrial perfusion. This is very nicely assessed on 3D power Doppler because the flow is more sensitive to slow flow. And we can see the vascularity going all the way in all 3 planes. And also we can create a shell which can have a thickness of 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter, whatever you want, and look for the vascularity within that shell. And this is helpful in gives better information of blood supply to the endometrium and subendometrial region, and is very useful in patients who this is done before implantation, and is very useful. The advantage is that if it's a poor flow, then one can ignore those cycles and try and improve them. We don't have to be doing subjective this thing. We can also quantify these vessel densities by using these vascular indices, which again are very simple. You calculate the volume and the machine itself gives you these indices. And the index which is commonly used is the flow index, which is when it's greater than 13 is seen in the pregnant group, and less than 11 is seen in the non-pregnant group. But these other two, VAS-VI and VFI, do not show any difference between the pregnant and non-pregnant groups. So here, this is what I was talking earlier, that when there's good endometrial perfusion, we can see going all the way into the endometrial cavity. And this is a pretty normal looking uterus, whereas here it's a hemi-uterus, which was picked up as an incidental finding because she came for evaluation of endometrial receptivity to look for the vascularity. And both of them show very good vascularity. They're good candidates for transfer. Whereas here, there are 2 different patients. You can barely see any vessel. There's some over here in the subendometrial, but there's endometrial region, but there's nothing which is going into the endometrial cavity in both these patients. And these patients need to be further worked out. Now, these are the charts which can be scored, which is a 3D scoring chart for patients undergoing IVF, and the maximum score and the cutoff, which is taken as 5, and the maximum score is 7. We look at the morphology, we look at the volumes, and the endometrial flow, which I have already just talked about. Now, when we have these good flows, we have done a good job. We can pick up these early sacs, and coronal plane is the one which picks it up. Here, on a sagittal plane, we could see only 2 sacs. When we do a 3D, there are three gestational sacs. And here, this is another advantage of 3D, is this is a dichorionic twin with a nice looking membrane separate, but one of the sac is a monochorionic, monoamniotic. You see the 2 embryos, but there is no dividing intertwin membrane. The other advantages on 3D is in the early pregnancy, they correlate the images which we get, and Gaurav has also shown us, are actually correlate very well to the embryological development. And here's the brain tissue, which is seen on a 3D reconstruction using the OmniView. And here, this is an example of one such patient, 10 weeks of pregnancy, and it's acrania. One does not have to wait till 12 weeks to diagnose this condition, and she can go in for termination at this time, at 10 weeks. It's very useful in ectopic pregnancy. It's in the ampullary segment, which is the more commonest presentation. Here we have the ovary, and this is the tubal pregnancy, which is what we are seeing here. When we see a sac which is eccentric in location, we call the patient back in 2 weeks to make sure that the sac is coming into the normal position. As compared to this particular patient, actually, she is interesting. She came for the first time. Within the first 2 weeks, we had told her it's a Cornwall pregnancy. And she had come to me at 5 or 6 weeks of gestation. And then I lost her because I told her it's a Cornwall pregnancy, and she was infertility treated, so she didn't want to do anything. She comes back for reconfirmation and she was told there's no cardiac activity, and just look at the way the cornua has expanded. There's hardly any cover of myometrial tissue. So she was opened up immediately, and if it wasn't, this would have ruptured. That's how they generally present. And this is a patient who had a cervical pregnancy. She refused to believe. Again, one of those IVF, she had ovulation induction, and she conceived with that. And she was actually came with pouring. She was pouring when she came at 10 weeks of pregnancy. And this was a patient who had a scar pregnancy. We can see that on 3D. We can see that it's in the region of the scar, and 2D actually picks it up very well. This actually I pick up to show the 3D advantage of a hypervascular myometrium. This over here, we have to correlate it with the beta HCG. If it's quantitative analysis, positive beta HCG, it's a molar pregnancy, still positive. It could be retained products of conception. In this particular patient, she had actually ruptured her uterine wall, and there was marked increased vascularity. So it was a large hematoma. Following treatment she had a DNC for missed abortion. And if the beta HCG is negative, we look for these things for the AVMs. In conclusion, I would like to say that endovaginal 3D ultrasound is an integral part of ultrasound in gynecology. Is less expensive, less invasive, less time consuming, and it's better than hysteroscopy or MRI. Additional information available on 3D has an impact on clinical decision making and in management. And I always say that if a radiologist recommends additional imaging after doing whatever you have, please use it. And if it still doesn't give you the answer, that's when we have to consider doing the MRI, which is a problem solving modality. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think it was a very nice presentation, and we get an overwhelming response. People not only from India, basically, people have joined from outside India also. There were 1,000+ people who actually watched this. So I was just going through the comments. There were really good comments that the topic was really good and very nice presentation. And there are a few questions also which are there, ma'am. If you allow, I'll ask you a few, and then you can answer them.
Sure.
Okay. And the first question is, hemiuterus and unicorn uterus are same or different?
No, they are the same. Unicornuate uterus was the word which was used by the ARSM classification, but because we are moving into the newer classification, which is by ESHRE, they call it a hemiuterus. It's the same thing.
Okay. I'll go to the next one. How to differentiate between a bicolus uterus and uterus Delphi?
You know, the uterine diadelphus and the bicornuate uterus actually is in the older classification. We look for the fundal and in the present classification, we call this bicorporal uterus. So anytime we are looking for these, we look for the fundal contour of the uterus. Now, if it shows an indentation and the indentation onto the endometrial cavity is going below that, that's when we call it a bicorporal uterus. Or a bicornuate, we have at some point it unites to form a single cavity, where it is uterine diadelphus. They're completely two separate uterine cavities, and both these cases, they have their own myometrium and the endometrium. So basic thing on a 3D is to look for the fundal contour, which is what is going to answer us when we are trying to differentiate between bicorporal or septate uterus also. Septate uterus will give a normal convex fundal contour, whereas bicornuate or bicorporal uterus will give an indentation along the fundal margin.
Okay, I'll go to the next one, last one. There are many more, but I'll just finish off because of the time constraint. What should the scale when we are doing color Doppler of ovarian mass?
The ovarian mass is like I showed you. I mean, I use IOTA classification, which basically tells us score 1 to 4, 1, which is no vascularity, and 2 mild, and 3 and 4 are the hypervascularity. So I go with the IOTA scoring and I use a 3D power Doppler because it gives me more vascular information. Is that what you were trying to ask? I'm sorry, whoever asked that question.
Yes, ma'am. This was the question which was there, ma'am. There are many more, but I think we'll conclude. Maybe I'll send you the questions later, then you can reply and I can send them on the emails.
Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time to take out time for this webinar. It was a really nice presentation. I think we can conclude here.
Thank you so much.
Last words from you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.